Okay, so we didn't need to run the get CSV mail unload variables a second time. That's not necessary. That should have been commented out. I'll delete that. Next thing we do, now that we have successfully loaded the variables, figured out the guy's email and so forth for this particular row, for this particular individual, and we know that he's not one of the wave people that we can ignore, we now come down and we got to figure out what is his status. And status is he a lead that needs to be converted? Is he an existing trilogy of contact, account, and opportunity? Is he a nobody, and do we have to create a whole new entity for him? Does he have more than one lead or more than one contact that leads to an error condition? We just have to go figure out what his deal is and just generally learn about him and run some tests. So that's what the get status piece does. Next, we're just we learn a little bit more about him. We're going to put the SFDC status into the import settings, etc., etc. And we come down, and now that we know what this SFDC status is, okay, if we know that it's a skip, great, we're done. Skip means that we don't have to process him. There was some condition that made it irrelevant. Number two, we know that if he's an existing lead that needs to be converted, now we go do this routine, which is the create convert. Okay, if he's a no find, that means we need to create a whole new trilogy of account, contact, and opportunity for him. And then else, this is the kind of the fallback position. We go ahead and say we go to the object opportunities and actually go do a further investigation on this guy, because think about it, if we didn't find him, we wouldn't have to do a further investigation into what the status of his opportunities are. Some people have opportunities, some people have multiple opportunities, some people there's all kinds of different ways. If he's a lead, he's not going to have an opportunity, so that the opportunity module would crash because leads don't have opportunities. If he's not there at all, obviously he doesn't have an opportunity. So we got to kind of get these conditions out of the way first, and let everybody go and get rid of everybody who doesn't have anything to talk about in the opportunity world. But if we get past this, if it's none of these guys, then we do have to go investigate their opportunity status. So we go ahead and go investigate their opportunities, and we'll look at that object a little later. And what happens there is it figures out, does he have two? Does he have one? Does he have none? Is this one we need to update? Is this one we need to, etc. So once we have that, we now come down. And by the way, breadcrumbs is something that I accumulate to give the user status updates on what I did. Whenever I do things, it's critically important to keep the user informed and to be very chatty about what happened, because when something goes wrong or something is incomprehensible and the user is confused, they want to be able to look back over the record and figure out what the system did and where the guy came from and his whole history. So I try to give them as much information as possible. What breadcrumbs is just this is a string that just gets larger and larger and larger as we go forward, and it tells the whole story of the trail. And every time there's a fork in the road as far as logic goes, I try to inform them as to what decision I made. Okay, so that's breadcrumbs. Now we have another issue. If we get down to this point and student ID equals null, now we know that we have a nulled out student ID, and we can we trigger we trigger an update against that. Now remember that in order for this had to happen very late in the game, because we do tolerate an LMS ID that is null. LMS, by the way, is the I actually don't know what LMS stands for. It's like uh, but it's their student ID basically. Um, the system tolerates a null and will set up the record anyway. And we'll set up, if it's a new guy, we'll set up a contact for him and all that good stuff. Now, he's got a Salesforce ID. He just doesn't have an internal student ID that we like. For that, I want to trigger my user, my administrator, to do something about that. So what I do is I send them, this is the error message that gets sent, LMS ID failure, and here's the key part. And notice that I have to pin it to a particular contact object. I have to say, I have to have a contact there first in order to put a message into that contact, so the administrator can go back and fix the problem and put in an LMS ID, student ID. And the other thing that I do here is there are 2 or 3 things that I can put when I assign a task to a to-do. One of them is completed, and all that does is that just passively goes into the user's history, into the history for that contact. But if you put an in progress, that goes into an active open entry, and that means that the user, it's going to come up on his radar and he's going to have to do something about it. It's not just a simple note, it's an actual assignment that says now you have to get busy and actually go do something actively. So that's what that task update status is. And then here, this is interesting also. This task update status is actually goes and puts the whole breadcrumbs. So all through the program, I've been accumulating this breadcrumbs, which has gotten longer and longer and longer and longer. It might have as many as 15 different things attached to it, and then I put that as a task. Okay, and then I set breadcrumbs to empty so that I could start with the next guy, and then I kick the row number and I say, okay, go to the next guy. Okay. And we start all over again, and then we go back up to the top of this the while loop. Okay, so once again, first thing we have the this is the while loop. We have the gating factor, which makes sure we don't overflow. We have and we start at the right number, and then we get the emails, we load up the variables, get rid of the ones that we can get rid of. And then we go figure out their status of their contacts, accounts and opportunities, and so forth. So that's basically the grand loop of the imports. In subsequent things, we'll drill a little more into exactly how we do it.